My name is Ava, I'm 30 years old, and I live in Austin, Texas. I work full-time as a remote data analyst for a private healthcare firm. It is a stable, quiet job that I've worked hard to land, and I genuinely enjoy the structure and order of it. I bought my first home 2 years ago, a modest but charming 3-bedroom on a quiet street that gave me the peace I had always wanted. I like clean counters, my morning coffee routine, and weekends spent reading or going to the farmer's market. I don't have children, and frankly, I enjoy the solitude that comes with that choice. What I don't enjoy is chaos. Which, ironically, is exactly what has been forced into my life by someone who used to know me better than anyone, my sister. Nicole is my older sister by 6 years. She's 36, a stay-at-home mom with 2 kids, Max, who is 8, and Lila, who just turned 6. Her husband, Sean, works in sales and is gone most of the week, often out of town or at late dinners with clients. Nicole and I were close as kids. We shared a room until she left for college. I looked up to her for years, even when I shouldn't have. But somewhere along the way, she stopped seeing me as her equal. Once I graduated, got a decent job, and eventually bought my home, her attitude shifted. She would joke about me being the rich single one, living the easy life, while she was drowning in diapers and laundry. At first, I thought it was just sibling banter. Then it became passive-aggressive. She started making comments like, "Must be nice to wake up whenever you want." Or, "Since you don't have kids, you should have more time to help out." And the thing is, it didn't start as some big dramatic overstep. It started small, almost unnoticeably. The first time she dropped the kids off unannounced, it was a Saturday morning. I was making pancakes and wearing the most unflattering pajamas known to mankind when she texted me, "Hey, emergency dentist run. Can you take the kids for an hour?" I said yes because it sounded urgent. She showed up 10 minutes later, kissed them goodbye, and was gone. She didn't come back for almost 4 hours. Then it started happening more often. Target runs. Quick errands that lasted entire afternoons. Hair appointments. Doctor visits. Eventually, she stopped asking. Instead, I'd find a note on the door or a text sent while she was already halfway across town. One morning I opened my front door to find Max and Lila sitting on my porch, backpacks in hand, waiting for me. It was 9 a.m. on a Tuesday. I was in the middle of a Zoom meeting. Nicole had texted, "Hey. Dentist appointment plus Target." Back by 3, as if I were some kind of drop-in childcare center. I told her, more than once, that I work from home. That my job is not optional. That just because I'm not commuting does not mean I'm lounging around watching Netflix. Her response was always dismissive. She would wave her hand and say things like, "They're good kids. They know how to entertain themselves." Or, "You're already home, what's the big deal?" The big deal was that my job requires concentration, data integrity, and client communication. I'm paid to deliver accurate, sensitive reports on strict timelines. And I had already started missing deadlines. My manager even asked if I was okay because my performance had dipped slightly. I was anxious, frazzled, and constantly checking my security camera to make sure there weren't surprise kids waiting on my doorstep while I tried to work. The tipping point came on a Thursday morning in early March. I was just settling into my second coffee and opening my analytics dashboard when my doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting a package. I opened the door to find a woman I had never seen in my life standing there with 2 toddlers, twins, probably 4 years old. She looked relieved. "You're Ava, right? Nicole said you're great with kids." I blinked. My mouth moved before my brain could even process the sentence. "I'm sorry, what?" She smiled, handed me a tote bag with snacks and diapers, and said, "Just until 2. I'm meeting friends for brunch and a nail appointment." Then she walked down the steps like this was the most normal thing in the world. I stood there in my fuzzy socks, staring at the 2 children she had just left on my porch. One was already halfway up my driveway chasing a squirrel. The other was picking something sticky off his shoe. It was surreal. I brought them inside because I didn't want them wandering the neighborhood, but I was in shock. I texted Nicole, demanding to know what the hell was going on. Her reply? "Oh, that's Tanya. She's super chill. You'll love her twins. Just throw on a movie if they get bored." I didn't even respond. I physically could not formulate a reply that didn't involve screaming. I watched the clock until 2 p.m., handed the kids back to Tanya, and immediately called Nicole. She laughed. Not even fake laughed, like real laughter. She said, "You're overreacting. You've always been good with kids, and they had fun. What's the harm?" I reminded her, in no uncertain terms, that I never agreed to this. That I am not a babysitter. That I work full-time and cannot risk my job to entertain other people's children. Her response? "Ava, you're home all day anyway. What else are you doing? Sitting at a laptop?" I was done. That night, I poured myself a glass of wine, opened Excel, and itemized everything. I looked up the standard daycare rates in our zip code, $12.50 an hour for one kid, $20 for siblings or group care. I estimated how many hours Max and Lila had been at my house in the past 3 months, a horrifying amount. I included time spent supervising them, snacks provided, toilet accidents cleaned, internet used for their iPads, cleaning supplies, and, yes, even the one time Max dropped juice on my work laptop and I had to buy a new keyboard. The final amount $2,780. I exported it to PDF, wrote a formal note requesting payment for informal daycare services, and emailed it to Nicole. I CC'd Sean. I also texted Nicole to let her know that if she ever dropped her kids or anyone's kids off at my house without explicit consent again, I would call Child Protective Services and report it as child abandonment. Because that is exactly what it was. She didn't respond. No apology, explanation, argument. Just silence. But oh, she did show up again. 3 days after I sent the invoice, there was a knock on my door. I half expected the police, honestly, or at least someone dropping off another pair of strange children. But when I peeked through the window, I saw Nicole. No kids. No car seat in the back. Just Nicole, standing on my porch in sweats and oversized sunglasses, her posture small and hesitant. When I opened the door, she didn't storm in. She didn't shout or roll her eyes like she usually did when confronted. Instead, she looked up at me with tear-streaked cheeks and said she needed to talk. Her voice was shaking. I let her in, but I kept my arms crossed the whole time. I knew better than to let my guard down around her when she was emotional. She sat on my couch and broke down crying. Not the silent, subtle kind. It was loud, messy, full-body sobbing. She said I had blindsided her. That it was unfair. That I was ruining the family over what she called a few afternoons of help. She claimed Sean was furious. That their budget couldn't absorb that kind of expense right now. That I was embarrassing her and putting her in an impossible position. That people in the family were already whispering, asking what she did to deserve such treatment. She begged me to retract the bill, said it would destroy her reputation. I stood there and listened without reacting. When she was done, I told her, in the calmest voice I could muster, that I would consider keeping the whole thing between us if she did one thing: apologize. A sincere apology. And a promise that this would never, ever happen again, not a dropped-off kid, not a last-minute text, not another entitled assumption that I existed to subsidize her lifestyle. That was my one condition. Nicole stared at me in silence for a long time. Then she stood up and muttered that she could not believe how cold I had become. She said I was turning my back on family. That I was being transactional about relationships that were supposed to be unconditional. And then she left. No apology. No promise. Just slammed the door behind her and peeled out of my driveway with enough force to rattle my mailbox. Later that night, my phone rang. It was my mom. I didn't even have to ask what it was about. I could hear the judgment in her voice before she said a word. She told me she had just gotten off the phone with Nicole, and that I needed to reconsider what I was doing. She said family doesn't charge each other for help. That what I had done was cruel. That Nicole was devastated. My mom's voice, usually calm and collected, had taken on that disappointed tone only mothers can wield. She told me I should be ashamed for creating such drama over a little babysitting. I wanted to scream. Instead, I asked her if she had seen the invoice. She hadn't. Nicole hadn't sent it. Of course she hadn't. I asked if she knew how many hours I had been saddled with children while I was trying to work. She brushed it off. Said Nicole told her it was just a few times. That she thought I enjoyed it. Then came the kicker. My cousin, Bethany, called. She's the type who only calls when there's gossip to chew on. She asked if I was okay. If I was in some kind of financial trouble. She said Nicole mentioned something about me extorting her for money and that I had fabricated a childcare bill to scam her. I nearly dropped my phone. Apparently, Nicole had told the extended family that I had gone off the deep end, sent her a fake invoice out of nowhere, and demanded thousands of dollars. That I was bitter, lonely, and taking it out on her because I didn't have a family of my own. That was the moment I snapped. I opened my laptop. I compiled everything. Screenshots of texts from Nicole telling me, "You owe me for all the babysitting you dodged over the years." Photos from my Ring camera of her kids being dropped off without warning. Even that ridiculous message she sent once that said, "Just pretend you're the fun aunt today. I'll bring wine next time." I included the invoice again. I listed everything, every hour, every cost, every act of unpaid labor she dumped on me. Then I drafted a group email to every relative who had called, commented, or sent me a passive-aggressive message. The subject line was simple: context. The body of the email was not emotional. It was factual. Bullet-pointed. Precise. I explained that I worked a full-time job from home. That I had told Nicole, repeatedly, that I was not available for childcare. That she had dropped her kids off, uninvited, and even sent strangers to my home with their children. I reminded them all that what Nicole had done was not only manipulative, it was illegal. Then I attached the invoice. With timestamps, photos, and documentation. I hit send. And the group chat went silent. No calls. No texts. Just silence. For once, the family drama vacuum had nothing to chew on. Nicole, who usually lived for that kind of attention, was suddenly radio silent. It stayed that way for 2 full days. I started to believe that the storm had passed, that maybe, just maybe, they had finally realized how far she had pushed things. Then I got a message. It was from Sean. I opened it cautiously, expecting more accusations. Instead, it was a complete 180. He wrote that he was sorry. That he had not known the full extent of what had been going on. That Nicole had framed the entire situation as if I had enthusiastically offered to take the kids because I missed having a family around. He said he had no idea other people's children had been involved. He thanked me for being so transparent and thorough. He said he had looked over the invoice and that it was more than reasonable. Then he wrote one final line. He said he would be paying the invoice in full. From his account. About a week after Sean paid me, $2,780 wired directly into my account with a simple subject line that read, "For the trouble, things were quiet." I thought it might be the beginning of a long overdue peace. Nicole had gone dark. No text rants. No unexpected visits. No toddlers materializing on my lawn. I even let myself believe she might be embarrassed enough to finally reflect on her behavior. That illusion shattered on a rainy Thursday morning when a black and white police cruiser parked at the end of my driveway. I had just returned from grabbing groceries, a mundane routine I finally had time for again without being ambushed by unexpected childcare. I was halfway through unloading the trunk when a uniformed officer approached me. He was calm, professional, and politely introduced himself. He said there had been a complaint filed by a Nicole Morrison. She claimed I had harassed her, made fraudulent financial threats, and committed what she referred to as emotional blackmail. I stood there frozen, holding a bag of frozen peas like it was a weapon. He clarified that he was not there to arrest anyone, just to document the claim and give me the chance to respond. I told him I had plenty to show him. I brought him inside, sat him at the kitchen table, and handed him a thick folder I had prepared weeks ago after sending that invoice. Inside were printed texts, dated emails, timestamps, Ring camera footage stills, and the invoice itself. I even had notes from my manager about disruptions to my work schedule, and a breakdown of local childcare rates as supporting documentation. Most importantly, there was zero evidence of me threatening Nicole. In fact, everything I'd done was either a factual boundary or a polite, if firm, refusal. He flipped through the stack, occasionally raising an eyebrow or exhaling through his nose in that slow, unimpressed way. Then he pushed the folder aside and said, quietly, that he wasn't supposed to offer opinions, but off the record, I had nothing to worry about. He told me there was no evidence of fraud, no threats, and certainly no grounds for legal action. He stood up to leave and then, with a sort of half-smirk, told me something that turned my stomach. He said, off the record, that this wasn't the first time my name had come up. It turns out, Nicole had been running a private Facebook group for nearly 6 months. It was called South Austin Working Moms Childcare Network, and she was one of the admins. That wasn't the shocking part. The shocking part was that she had been listing me, without my knowledge, as a provider. In post after post, she described her sister Ava as a licensed childcare partner who runs a low-ratio in-home setup with flexible hours and a calm temperament. I wasn't licensed. I wasn't flexible. I wasn't even aware I was listed. But it didn't stop there. She had been accepting drop-ins from people in her community and arranging playdates at the local park, sometimes without even being present. She'd pitch it to the other moms like it was a shared daycare model, like a little Montessori co-op, she wrote. There were posts with photos, comments from moms thanking her and me. Messages like Ava was so patient with my twins yesterday, or can Ava take Aiden on Thursday again? As though I was part of this entire setup. I had no idea who these children were. No idea when she'd had them at my house. No idea I'd apparently hosted a dozen trial days. The officer said he had stumbled across the group while verifying her complaint, and once he saw how I was being marketed as a willing participant, he decided to let me know. I thanked him and walked him out, still numb. Then I sat down at my computer, took a deep breath, and began the next phase. I logged into Facebook, tracked down the group, and began screenshotting everything. Every post where my name was mentioned, every comment referencing our setup, every thank you that implied I had agreed to this. I saved photos, timestamps, participant names, every shred of evidence. Then I reported the group to Facebook for impersonation and unauthorized representation. But I didn't stop there. I filed a formal complaint with her HOA. You see, several of the drop-offs and so-called daycare meetups Nicole had organized took place in her gated communities park and clubhouse, which are governed by strict HOA rules. According to the HOA handbook, which I found online, those amenities were not to be used for unlicensed business activity, including childcare. Especially not when the listed provider was not even present or consenting. I gathered everything and submitted a detailed report to the HOA board, attaching the Facebook screenshots, a timeline, and a copy of the police incident summary. It took less than a week to hear back. Nicole was fined by the HOA for misuse of community resources. She was also issued a formal warning stating that any future violations, including unauthorized business activity, unsupervised child drop-offs, or misrepresentation of service, would result in suspension of all community privileges for a minimum of 6 months. That included the pool, the park, the clubhouse, and even HOA-sponsored events like summer camp signups and Halloween parties. I didn't even feel smug. I felt tired. Tired of being gaslit, tired of being dragged into drama I never asked for, tired of being cast as the villain for simply wanting my boundaries respected. But part of me knew this wasn't over. Not when family was involved. Because the moment the HOA sanctions came down, the gossip picked up again. My Aunt June called to say she just didn't understand why I couldn't help out a little more. My second cousin Renee left a comment on one of my Instagram photos saying, "Family's supposed to show up, not lawyer up." My own mother sent a 2-sentence text that simply said, "This is tearing your sister apart. You've made your point. Stop now." But others reached out with different energy. One cousin messaged to say she had no idea Nicole had manipulated things so badly. A former co-worker of Nicole's said she had always been a bit slippery with the truth and that she wasn't surprised. Even Sean sent a follow-up email apologizing again, saying he'd seen the Facebook group and was appalled. He assured me he'd had no part in it and that he was handling things privately with Nicole. It wasn't his job to fix her, but he said he wanted me to know he was stepping back from defending her behavior. That meant more than I expected. Now the family is fractured. Group chats have splintered. Holidays are being quietly reconfigured into awkward factions. Some relatives are standing behind Nicole, insisting she just needed help. That motherhood is hard, and I should have been more understanding. Others are stunned, disgusted, even, that she went so far as to monetize her own sister's life without her consent. Half the family thinks Nicole is a struggling mom who made a few mistakes. And half are shocked by what she'd done. About 2 months later, things settled. Not entirely, there were still awkward silences at family gatherings and the occasional cold glance from relatives who refused to let it go, but the chaos died down enough that I could finally breathe. Nicole never apologized. Not once. She didn't try to make amends, didn't explain, didn't justify. She just stopped speaking to me. No texts, no calls, no passive-aggressive memes about forgiving your family. It was radio silence. And honestly, it was the most peaceful silence I'd had in years. No more surprise doorbell rings at 8:30 a.m. No more sudden texts saying the kids were on the way. No more strangers thinking I was the flexible provider for Nicole's pop-up babysitting ring. Just quiet mornings, focused work hours, and my house finally feeling like my own again. I could light a candle without worrying someone's kid would blow it out. I could leave snacks out without fear of a mystery child with allergies rummaging through my cabinets. Sean, however, was different. He never joined the smear campaign. He didn't try to guilt me, didn't pretend Nicole was in the right. He stayed calm, respectful, and, shockingly, cordial. He even started texting me directly about the kids when necessary. Once, I invited Max and Lila over for a Sunday craft day, and Sean brought them over with a tote bag of labeled snacks, wipes, water bottles, and a small envelope with emergency contacts. He didn't linger. He didn't assume. He asked if it was still a good time, thanked me, and left. When he came to pick them up, he asked how everything went and if they behaved. It was the first time I saw him step into the role of actual parent rather than silent bystander. He respected the new boundaries. It was subtle, but clear. He understood. Nicole might not have learned anything from this mess, but Sean had. But the real fallout didn't come from the family or even the HOA. It came from the other parents. The ones Nicole had roped into her fake childcare fantasy without a second thought. Once word spread about the truth, once people realized that Nicole had listed me as her partner without my knowledge or consent, some of them got angry. Really angry. One mom, Claire, reached out through Facebook Messenger, livid that she had unknowingly left her 4-year-old twins in the care of someone she thought was a licensed professional. She said Nicole assured her I was certified, had CPR training, and ran a home-based enrichment program. Claire told me she paid Nicole over $200 for 3 drop-off sessions, and now she wanted her money back. Nicole, unsurprisingly, had already spent it. More messages followed. Some polite, some furious. Parents demanding refunds, accountability, or at least acknowledgement that they had been lied to. 2 said they had already reported Nicole to the community board. 1 mentioned speaking to a friend who worked for a state regulatory agency. I don't know how far any legal threats went, but the heat got intense enough that Nicole had no choice. She shut down the Facebook group completely. Every post, every comment, every photo vanished overnight. No goodbye message. Just gone. Like it had never existed. But it was too late. Screenshots had circulated. Emails had been sent. And the HOA didn't forget. They followed up with another notice, this time formal and specific. Nicole was required to sign a statement promising not to operate or advertise any unlicensed childcare services within the community. She had to refund what she could to the families who complained, and while she avoided actual criminal charges, she narrowly missed being reported to child welfare services for negligence. The only thing that saved her was that no child had been injured or lost. But she came close. One parent revealed their kid wandered off during a park drop-off because Nicole had gone to grab a coffee and left Ava, the invisible caregiver, in charge. Nicole's little side hustle collapsed like a sandcastle at high tide. Fast. Ugly. Public. Her reputation took a beating. The mom's circles she used to float through with curated Instagram smiles and organic snack tips stopped inviting her. Her group chats went quiet. She became, at least temporarily, radioactive. And she hated it. But she had no one to blame. No one had twisted her arm to lie. No one had forced her to use my name as a shield. She did that all by herself. As for the family, the great moral panic finally fizzled. No more lectures about helping family or being generous with your time. The group texts were awkward for a while, some went completely silent. But I noticed something interesting. A few of the more critical voices reached out quietly with small, hesitant apologies. My Aunt June sent a birthday card with a note that said, "I overreacted. I'm sorry." My cousin Bethany, the one who called to ask if I was struggling financially, left a voicemail that simply said, "You were right to set boundaries." Others never apologized. But I stopped caring. And then, something unexpected happened. A few of the parents who had unknowingly used Nicole's fake daycare network reached out again. Not with complaints this time, but with questions. They had children who still needed care. Real care. And now they were nervous about trusting anyone. One mom asked if I could recommend someone I trusted. Another asked if I knew how to check credentials or licenses. A third asked if I'd be willing to help her interview a few candidates because she didn't feel confident doing it alone. I wasn't a childcare expert. But I was a data analyst. Vetting, researching, cross-referencing, that I could do. I helped one mom draft interview questions. I ran background checks for another through publicly available databases. I pulled up inspection reports for local daycares and compiled side-by-side comparisons. It wasn't rocket science, but to them, it was a huge relief. Eventually, one parent offered me a small retainer to help her create a full-time nanny hiring checklist and onboarding packet. It felt surreal. The same situation that had started with me being used and manipulated had somehow evolved into a consulting opportunity. Not my career path by any means, but still, a strange little silver lining.